There is something about being left alone with my own thoughts. For whatever reason, that's when I do my deepest reflecting. That's when ideas show up out of nowhere. Sometimes they're good ideas, sometimes they're crazy ideas. But this one felt like something I had to follow. I needed to find out what happened to Mr. Anderson. I had managed to gather a couple of leads on where he lived, and before I knew it, I was walking down the hallway of his apartment building. Every step toward his door came with another question. What happened to him? Did the devil finally get him, or was the devil still holding him captive inside that apartment? The closer I got, the quieter everything seemed to become. I knocked. After a long pause, the door slowly creaked open. Mr. Anderson stood there, hesitating. Looking back, I understand why. But before I go any further, let me pause the music for a second. Imagine walking into an apartment that looks as if a tornado somehow picked up one man's entire life, spun it around the room, slammed it against every wall, then disappeared without warning. Furniture sat at odd angles. Bottles were knocked over. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. It looked like chaos itself had rented the place, yet there sat Mr. Anderson, almost peacefully, almost as if none of it existed, as if he didn't even notice the disaster surrounding him. Honestly, I was surprised he even let me inside. He quietly stepped aside and I walked in. I pulled over a chair and sat down. Neither of us said a word. It was one of those moments where silence somehow says everything. His silence almost felt like a confession, like he was saying, here it is. This is why I haven't shown up to work for weeks. I simply sat there, taking it all in, every broken piece, every overturned bottle, every unanswered question. And honestly, part of me couldn't help but think, the devil has to have something to do with this. Something. Eventually, the silence broke. Mr. Anderson leaned forward and finally spoke. Look, I've had a lot going on. I'm trying to get some things together in my personal life. I just haven't been there. So, whatever happened to the stories happened. I remember thinking, what stories? He hadn't left anything behind. Then it hit me. Wait, the story about the devil? So I stayed quiet. Sometimes people don't need advice. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to listen. And that's exactly what I did. I let him vent everything. Months, maybe years of bottled up frustration came pouring out all at once. Honestly, I was surprised by how open he became, but I also understood it was like watching a pressure cooker finally release. Eventually, the conversation shifted. It wasn't about work anymore. It wasn't about stories. It wasn't even about the apartment. It was about his relationship. No, let me correct that. His marriage, actually, let me correct that again. His marriage that was falling apart, a separation, a divorce, one I never even knew existed. To be fair, Mr. Anderson and I had always kept our distance at work. We respected each other's space. We worked on different projects. We never really talked about our personal lives. So hearing all of this, it caught me completely off guard. He kept talking. I kept listening. Inside my own head, though, questions kept piling up. How does a marriage reach this point? How does something that once started with love end like this? Is this really how relationships end? Is this the ending? Then, while he was talking, I finally asked the only question that made sense to me, quietly, almost reluctantly. Was there any cheating? I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind. Maybe because from everything he had described, it felt like there had to be some kind of betrayal. Without hesitation, he answered, yeah. Then he immediately followed it with something I'll probably never forget. But I'm not a bad person because I cheat. I never disrespected her. It took everything inside me not to react. Not because I wanted to judge him, but because I genuinely couldn't understand the logic. Inside my own mind, I kept thinking, if you want to cheat, why get into a committed relationship at all? The way he talked about it wasn't like it had happened once. It sounded like cheating had simply become part of who he was. Yet at the same time, he explained everything else he had done right. He paid the bills. He handled the responsibilities. He was present. He was a good father. A father, I didn't even know he had a daughter. He reached over and handed me a framed photograph sitting beside the couch. I looked down. Beautiful wife, beautiful little girl, a beautiful family, the kind of family people dream about. the kind that looks like it came straight out of a fairy tale. And somehow, here we were, surrounded by broken furniture and an even more broken marriage. The truth is, I didn't know what to think. And I've never really been in a serious relationship myself. Honestly, like I usually leave long before things ever become that serious. Relationships, no, commitment and marriage, that those were territories I never really explored. So I certainly wasn't qualified to tell someone else how to save theirs. Still, watching him sit there, watching a grown man slowly fall apart, it was difficult. Part of me felt deeply sorry for him. Another part completely understood why repeated cheating could destroy everything that had once been built. After a long pause, I finally said, well, Mr. Anderson, like, surely there's something that can fix this. I mean, maybe counseling. People go to counseling for relationships. I think that's what they do. They work through things, they fix what's broken, and somehow they find their way back to each other. Mr. Anderson lowered his head into his hands. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence answered for him. You could feel it, the hopelessness, the exhaustion, the weight of realizing that maybe just maybe he had already given up believing there was anything left to save. Again, I said, well, what about counseling? What about talking to a friend, another guy, other husbands, people who have actually been through relationships? How do they fix things? What do they do? Do they have some kind of club where married people get together and figure this stuff out? I honestly didn't know. I've seen movies where married couples sit around talking with other married couples. They encourage each other, work through problems, and somehow leave with a solution. I figured maybe that's how it worked in real life too. There's got to be something that helps fix a marriage. Mr. Anderson just sat there, head hanging low, slowly shaking it from side to side. Finally, I leaned forward and simply said, well, listen, Mr. Anderson, fix it. As simple as that. Fix it. Clean up your mess. Pull yourself together. Fix it. He never raised his head. Honestly, I think he was crying. Maybe not openly. Maybe it was just a couple of tears. But whatever was happening inside of him, like it was breaking him. And once again, I found myself standing in territory I knew absolutely nothing about. I couldn't honestly relate to what he was feeling. I'd never been there. I understood hopelessness. I understood disappointment, but I didn't understand what it felt like to watch a marriage collapse. If I'm being honest, there was another feeling inside me too. Part of me was frustrated, almost seeing it through his wife's eyes. I kept thinking, like, how can someone be a chronic cheater and still be confused about why their spouse leaves? That part I just couldn't understand. Then again, I've never allowed myself to get that far. Usually, I leave relationships long before they become that serious, long before titles, long before marriage, long before the really messy parts. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying I've never reached this chapter. So here I was, trying to give advice about a story I'd never personally lived. Inside my own mind, it almost felt like I had a little checklist. First option, counseling, check. Second option, talk to other married people, people who've been there, people who understand, check. Third option, pull yourself together, snap out of it, fix your mess. That was all I had left, so I tried one more time. I said, listen, Mr. Anderson, I'm honestly not sure what the perfect advice is, but I do know this. People go through hard things in relationships, and somehow they find their way to the other side. Sometimes they heal. Sometimes they become healthier. Sometimes they become friends. Sometimes they rebuild. It doesn't always have to end with you sitting here like this. You don't have to stay in this place. The more I talked, the more I realized nothing I was saying was getting through. That's when I finally threw away the checklist altogether. I decided to stop pretending I knew the answers. So I looked him in the eyes and simply said, listen, I've never really been in a serious relationship. So I honestly can't tell you how to fix one. But I can tell you this, you've got to fix yourself. You may not be able to fix your marriage today. You can't control what someone else chooses, but you can control you. You got to pull yourself out of this. You've got to become the best version of yourself. Whether this marriage comes back together or whether it doesn't, you're still going to need yourself. So start there. And honestly, it almost feels like you let the devil take over for some strange reason that made him laugh. He slowly looked up. The devil? I smile. Yeah, the devil. You disappeared. You left one story behind. And it happened to be about the devil. So everybody back at the office has pretty much decided the devil finally came and got you. For the first time, everything changed. The heaviness in the room shifted. The tension disappeared. The hopelessness loosened its grip. There was something different in his eyes. Not happiness, not completely, but there was light, just enough light to remind me the man underneath all that pain was still in there somewhere. Then we both started laughing. And honestly, it felt good. It felt like maybe, just maybe, Hope had finally found a tiny crack to squeeze through. Who would have thought, after everything we talked about, that it would take a joke about the devil to bring a broken man back to laughter? It reminded me of that old movie, Poltergeist. Almost like someone had reached into the darkness and whispered, "Come back to the light." And for just a moment, it felt like he did. After that little breakthrough, something changed. Honestly, like it felt good, really good. And for the first time since walking into that apartment, I felt like maybe I could finally go back to the first couple of things on my mental checklist. Well, I thought to myself, the fact that you're laughing has to mean something. Maybe laughter meant hope. Maybe laughter meant there was still another chapter left to write. Not necessarily that everything would magically work out, but maybe this wasn't the ending after all. Maybe it was simply the beginning of something healthier waiting on the other side. I was still kind of scattered. This whole situation was completely outside my comfort zone. To be honest, part of me still thought it would have been easier if the devil had literally shown up. At least then we'd know what we were fighting. Maybe we'd have one of those dramatic movie scenes where somebody performs an exorcism, the devil gets defeated, everybody cheers, the music starts playing, and life goes back to normal. That would have been a whole lot simpler. But unfortunately, my real life doesn't usually work that way. Instead, here we were, sitting in the middle of a disaster, somehow finding ourselves laughing. After everything we talked about, I looked over at him and said, "Listen, Mr. Anderson, maybe you just need a little more time. But I think your first project should probably be cleaning this place." I looked around the apartment again. "I'm pretty sure you're violating at least a few health codes. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the apartments decided to terminate your lease if they saw this. This place doesn't even look real." That made him laugh even harder. Then I became serious again. "Maybe instead of rushing back to work, focus on your writing. Focus on your projects. Get everything together before you try presenting it. And when you're ready, come back to the team. I'll keep covering your work. Our teams can continue working together until you're ready to return." For the first time, he looked relieved, almost as though someone had finally given him permission to breathe. Maybe that was all he needed. Not someone to solve his problems, not someone with perfect relationship advice. Just someone willing to say, "It's okay. Get yourself together first." I noticed something else too. He smiled. Not the smile I'd seen before. Not the kind people wear to hide behind. Not the forced smile that says, "I'm okay," when they're clearly falling apart. This one was different. It was genuine. As I stood up, I asked him to point me toward the door, mostly because I didn't want to accidentally trip over everything scattered across the apartment. He laughed again. Then he quietly walked me to the door. Before I left, I turned around one last time. "Listen, take whatever time you need. I'll continue combining your team with mine so we can keep these projects moving. And when you're ready, come back. We've got another collaborator waiting to meet you." He looked puzzled. "Another collaborator?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think the three of us are going to work really well together. So when you're ready, we'll all sit down together." He nodded. And somehow, he looked lighter than when I'd first walked through that door. As for me, I left feeling completely exhausted, but strangely happy. It had been one of the longest days. By the time I made it back to my own apartment, all I wanted to do was fall face first onto my bed and disappear into sleep. I walked down my hallway, reached my door, and stopped. There, hanging beside my doorknob, was the most beautiful bouquet of flowers, sunflowers, my favorite. They had been carefully tied together in a gorgeous arrangement, almost glowing in the hallway light. I carefully picked them up. Attached was a small card. It was from Michael, Mr. M. I stood there, reading the card, then reading it again and again. It was one of those quiet moments you don't expect, the kind that sneaks up on you, the kind that makes your heart smile before Your face does. It was a whole vibe, the kind of feeling where you realize you have a crush, butterflies, warmth, that little glow you can't really explain. I just stood there holding those sunflowers, smiling to myself. It honestly felt like he had placed the perfect ending on what had been such an emotionally heavy day. I couldn't help but laugh. Well played, Mr. M. Well played. And the best part? This was all happening before our very first official date, only a few days away. What a day. I went from trying to save Mr. Anderson from the devil to coming home and finding the most beautiful sunflowers waiting at my door from Mr. M. Now that's one incredible way to end the day.
Finally, I can breathe again. Lost in the waves, I wander. But in your eyes, I see no pain. You're a holiday, a break from the rain. Sipping your sunshine.